Hello and welcome back to the studio. I am so excited to walk you through this watercolor hummingbird tutorial today. This is a ruby-throated hummingbird. It is beautiful. You can see I already have done the illustration for it, and I'll have my reference image linked down below. I've also applied some masking fluid, mostly in dots, kind of where the feathers are more ruffled, and a couple of lines that I want to use to emphasize. Those will become a little bit more obvious as I start painting. I am starting today with a lemon yellow hue underpainting or glaze. This is used just to kind of give a little bit of life to the painting by having that nice bright color underneath that will really help to kind of give this glow, kind of this lit from within, a very ethereal look to the hummingbird. It's something I've been experimenting with. I've used it with some of the leaves within this composition. I don't like it as much for leaves, spoiler alert. But I did actually like how it turned out with this hummingbird. But just again, a very light wash, not a lot of pigment and not a lot of water on my brush. After that dries, I'm going to start going in with the actual color. Now this is the first hummingbird that I've ever painted and the first bird I've painted in years. So I do go in very lightly and we're going to go through many passes. You might actually get sick of me painting the same areas over and over again. But trust the process. I promise that it works out. And I was actually really happy with it. So I'm starting with my green mixture today. This green is a mix of Jadeite Genuine by Daniel Smith, which is a very cool tone green, and Sap Green, which is more neutral, but I would say is more of a warm tone green. This hummingbird, again, check my reference photo down below. It has a good mix of both. So I was playing around with kind of what I wanted to do. And you can already see if you look kind of at the belly of or I guess the side of the hummingbird, but the center section of the body that we can see how it has kind of a glow. That's that lemon yellow poking through. But for this whole piece, I'm going to use the green that I talked about, the Sap Green and the Jadeite Genuine, mixed with alizarin crimson and cadmium red, which is my neutral red mixture. I'm going to be using this mixture. You can see kind of it split in many different ways, kind of different cocktails, if you will, throughout this painting. Sometimes it'll be mixed where the greens are stronger, and sometimes it'll be mixed where the reds are stronger, but it'll just be in different concentrations of each, and you'll see that it creates really a beautiful painting overall. So right now I have kind of a good mix of the two, definitely leaning more green, and I'm using that to kind of help model out the body of the hummingbird. And modeling is just kind of a fancy art word that means like shading or making it look three-dimensional. And then I'm going to continue kind of going through, building that up. I am going a little heavier on the green again with this wash or this pass of painting, this layer, in order to kind of help define the body of the bird. But I'm using that red in there to help neutralize it, to make it look more like a shadow. I'm doing the same thing with the wings here. So just slowly adding it through, defining the space. I am not going to go through and paint every single feather, every single tip of the wing. I'm not going through and painting like that. That is photorealism. It is a beautiful style, but if you look at my flowers on the right, you can see them a little bit. That's not what I do with my flowers. It's not what I do with my leaves. So in order to stay consistent, I really want to just kind of define the space, show different shapes, and kind of imply. I'm kind of going for more of the impressionistic implication, where you can tell that it's feathers, you can tell where there's a ruffle, but you don't necessarily see every single one. All right, now back to what I'm actually painting. You can see if you look at my reference photo, which again, linked down below, that the ruby-throated hummingbird has a beautiful mask, basically, but just kind of a dark band by the eyes. I believe it just helps them see better in the sun, but that is mixed with our same green mixture and our same red mixture, but as it's getting darker and as I want it to be more black, I'm going to mix a more even amount every single time. So you'll see that I'm using this for that band, but also for making a shadow, as well as for the beak, which I'm painting right now. So I'm painting this beak, and it is almost even mixtures of my green and my red. just to make sure that it's nice and dark and neutral. It does lean a little bit more green because, again, my reference photo shows a little bit more of a green beak and more of a green lean for really everything except the throat. And so I'm kind of making sure that it fits that. But to continue to make it look darker and more neutral, I'm just adding more of that red tone. I am also adding more red tone now to the wings. So the feathers of the wings, we've defined them a little bit with our neutral, a little bit more green color, but I've added much more of our red, which again is alizarin crimson and the cadmium red mixed in almost equal parts. But I'm adding that with the green mixed in as a wash for the wings. So the wings of the ruby-throated hummingbird lean more red, which I think is a beautiful complement to the throat itself on the male hummingbird, and it just really helps to kind of make the whole body look a little bit more unified. And I don't know, I think it's beautiful. It's an unexpected pop of color on an already beautiful, colorful bird. So again, I'm not defining every single feather. Like, it would be tempting to go through with a very small brush and add all that texture, and I actually thought about it, but it wouldn't be consistent with the style of the rest of the bird. So if you do want to add something like that, just remember you're going to have to add it throughout the composition. Same color again, I'm using it to define kind of the ruffles on the chest and on the stomach, and then also kind of mapping out where the ruby throat will be. Using that just kind of as I'm using this as a guide for later, but the reason I wanted to use kind of this red tone for the ruffles on the chest is just to kind of add a little bit more contrast and visual interest to the bird itself. If everything on the body is green, I don't know, I just like to have the repetition of, so there's some red on the wings, there's some red on the throat, there's some red on the stomach, there's some red on the tail, and just having that repetition helps to create a little more interest. It helps your eye to move around, but it also helps to keep it from being too boring. All right, it's time to dive in on this ruby throat, and I can honestly say I'm nervous. I'm going to be kind of going in very delicately. For me personally, with this composition, I'm worried about it fighting for attention with those purple azaleas that I'm painting for this composition. So this is something that you won't have to worry about. Just find a red that you like or that fits most with the reference photo and go with that. So I did go in very lightly to kind of make sure that the tone was what I wanted it to be, and I'm going to allow that to dry before I go in with the color more aggressively. So you can see I'm kind of jumping around. I'm adding more pigment to the crown of the hummingbird before I go in more aggressively, if you will, with the throat. All right, it's time to paint the throat in. I'm pretty happy with the tones. If you are worried about kind of tonal, you can practice on a scrap piece of paper, or you can just do what I did and just do a light wash, and that should help give you an idea of whether or not something is too yellow, too blue, too green, just kind of give you an idea of the undertones a little bit more and if everything is working. But I'm pretty happy with what's going on. I'm pretty confident that we've made the right decision. We'll see how it works out as the painting progresses. One thing I did want to try with this painting, and something I've done with painting birds in the past, is put a little bit of table salt on the wet paint. So, sorry, my hand is in the way. I was just trying to work quickly before the paint dried, and so I'm applying a little bit of just regular table salt to the wet paint to get kind of a textured look. I am going through and I'm adding just a little bit of paint to kind of the edges to make sure that those are defined the way that I want them to be, but we're going to see how this texture works out. All right, while that dries, I'm going to continue to add layers and deepen the feathers of the body. So after studying the reference photo and just kind of experimenting a little bit with my washes, I've really decided that where I want to go with this is cooler feathers kind of towards the back of the hummingbird, and then as you approach the side, they get a little bit warmer, which fits with our lemon yellow wash, and it kind of helps to complement the two greens that I have. So I have Jadeite Genuine, or a cool tone green. You could mix in even a little bit of ultramarine blue if you wanted to just stick with like sap green. So have that towards the back, and then I move more toward, I have really almost pure sap green as I'm working towards the side of the bird, and just blending that in. So, mostly dry, just a little bit damp, wet brush to kind of help blend that in. I want these gradients to be really smooth. Then I'm also adding a little bit of lemon yellow in there, just so that I don't lose what I have placed in my wash, just because I'm adding a lot of pigment, and even though watercolor is semi-transparent, I don't want to lose what we have. All right, I'm also going to define the wings at this point. There are just some green areas that kind of bleed into the longer feathers of the wings, and I'm just taking a little bit of sap green very lightly and kind of adding some dashes, then going back in with the Jadeite Genuine, again my more blue tone green, and just kind of defining the space. To soften it though, I'm going to go through with them. Cleaned it off, it's just a little bit damp, and I'm using that to kind of spread the paint around a little bit more, just to kind of help keep everything nice and soft. I don't want that to steal the show by being a row of stripes, but I do want it to kind of have it there. It's a little bit more accurate, but I also think that it's really pretty. Well, after the throat dried, I realized that I hated the salt effect, so no big deal. I scraped the salt off. I'm using a stiffer brush. This is kind of an all-purpose brush to kind of massage the paint and help to activate it again. Then I'm creating a shadow by adding a little bit of our green in there in order to kind of get the neutralize the color and darken it a little bit, and just helping to add a shadow to make that throat kind of a little bit more rounded. I'm doing this while the paint is just a little bit damp in order to have a nice even gradient. Again, I don't want my paper like soaked. I don't want there to be a puddle, but I do want it to be damp in order to have that gradient. I'm much happier with the way the throat is, and so I'm going to add some more definition with these wings. So again, I'm not going to add every single feather, but I am going to kind of give the implication. So you can see I'm like wiggling my brush back and forth a little bit. That's to give the, I'm letting the viewer know there's some texture here, there's some visual interest, but I'm not painting every single feather. All right, it's time to get rid of some of this masking fluid. I'm just using my finger here. You can also use an eraser, which is usually my preference, and just kind of a quick massage across the masking fluid will help to pick it up. And you can see I've got like these little speckles kind of scattered about, and those will be beautiful highlights. In order to soften them though, I'm just going to add a little color that we mixed, but you can still see there's now a highlight. It's just not screaming at you the way it was before. Then I'm going to add a little bit of like sap green and lemon yellow mixed together to the highlights on the wings, and a little bit on kind of the side, and a little bit by the belly as well. All right, to finish her off, I'm going to take that masking fluid from the highlight of the eye. I am going to I just feel like it's a little bit big and a little bit too cartoony. So I am going to add a little bit of it's not as dark as the eye is, and it's a little bit more warm tone, but just a little bit of that neutral tone in to kind of close that a little bit, make it look a little bit more realistic and a little bit less like a Disney hummingbird, if that makes sense. So I just kind of adding that in, a little bit of a shadow. It looks a lot darker here than it does in person. I'm not really sure why, but that was enough to finish him off. I'm so happy with how he turned out, and I feel like there's a lot of life and a lot of interest, and it's still delicate and beautiful. If you enjoy watercolor hummingbirds, my friend Christina has also posted a hummingbird tutorial on her channel, and I will have that linked down below. And until next time, happy painting!